There are watches that come with a history, and there are watches that come with a story. There are then some watches that offer experience on the wrist that is truly one of a kind. And then there are watches that offer all of this all together within a single package. 1972 marked the birth of Royal Oak as conceived, designed and sketched by Gerald Genta. This was the first watch that introduced the concept of luxury steel watch at the time when the luxury was almost synonym to precious metal. This was the watch that created an entire category of luxury steel watch within itself. The original design, as sketched by Genta, came in 39mm case size, 2 hands in the dial, and extra thin case at 8.2mm. AP not just mastered the final product in the same case size of 39mm, rather they later introduced a new variation intelligently, and instead of discontinuing or changing the Genta sketched Royal Oak, they left it out as is in its purest form, case size, thickness and even the movement, and added a new modern Royal Oak line in 2003 in the form of reference 15300. The new more accessible reference 15300 in the same 39mm size remained in production until 2012, when it was finally upsized to 41mm in the form of reference 15400. 7 years down the line, and we saw all new Royal Oak 15500 in 41mm case size. Every time there is a new release in the watch, the idea behind the change is the upgrade, and accordingly, when the all-new Royal Oak 15500 was released, it did bring with it some changes that covered up for shortcomings of previous generation 15400. This also meant that the dial was required to be changed, and the overall new layout not just gave the watch a new and fresher look, but very different too. I have discussed the aesthetical differences in my comparison video as per link above, so in this video I will rather talk about this new black dial and its design elements. In this new reference, AP haven't changed the case size, and technically it is the same 41mm case size as it was before, but the overall looks, layout and presence of this new model are considerably bigger than the older reference 15400. This is interestingly a similar change as Rolex did in Submariner back in 2010 when they released Super case subs, and while the watch on paper had the same case size of 40mm, the Submariner in real life and on the wrist was considerably bigger. Here in Royal Oak, the size hasn't changed so much, yet it's the dial and the bezel that make it look slightly bigger than 15400, although the size on paper is the same. I would even go out to say that the new 15500 looks about 1mm larger on the wrist than the old 15400. The new reference is all about the dial and the magic that the tapestry dial has to play. The thicker and shorter hour markers that are then further pushed out to dial rim, and then the removal of word automatic from the text from the lower half of the dial has contributed in how there's a lot more tapestry squares and empty space on site now. This is further complemented by the date that is pushed out to meet the dial rim, and then there's a minute chapter ring on the dial that adds to the sporty characters of the watch. The black color itself is interesting one, and due to its shade being dark, while it's not the best style to show the magic of tapestry dial, the richness of contrast it has to offer is truly another experience and is something that makes it versatile and long-lasting. Due to rich contrast, there are many times that you can't even see that the dial has any protruded squares on it at all, and while I personally like the character it adds for the dial to move between 3-dimensional to 2-dimensional experience, it can easily break the deal for many, as it results in relatively lesser prominent tapestry squares and limited reflections that lighter shade variants on this watch have to offer. The hour markers come with the same chamfered edges, and the way they reflect the light to send mini light strokes is indeed an experience of its own. The seconds hand has skeletonized counterweight, which not just blocks the view of the dial, but also complements the sporty looks of the watch. The hour and minute hands maintain the iconic shape as before, but they are slightly widened, especially in the lume area, and we will see this further in the lume shot shortly. To show the size or substance of the watch, the size of watch case measured at the outer extremity of the bezel is 41.02 mm. The horizontal size of the watch with the crown included is 44.43 mm. To show the size of the watch dial, I measured the size of crystal on top and it came on my caliber at 31.92 mm. So this is relatively a bigger face and you do feel it on the wrist. The dimension of watch case before it tapers down towards the bracelet is 42.14 mm. So I personally think this is a 42 mm case size, unless you consider the bezel dimension as the case size. The width of bracelet at the widest point is 26.06 mm and it tapers down at the narrowest point to 18.10 mm. The bracelet does not stick straight down towards the clasp, rather it flares out further, making the wearability of the watch even larger. The minimum span that the watch has is 50.01 mm. So it's not a small watch and it will not fit you if your wristband is less than 50 mm. The weight of the watch adjusted to 6.5 inches wrist is 161 grams. So it is a relatively heavier watch and you do feel the weight on the wrist. The watch comes with the case treatment that is truly matchless with anything in the game. The top surface of the bezel has very fine brushing and the brushed lines are so clear that you can actually count them. The polished screws add contrast to brushed bezel, and then there's very elegant chamfered profile that also receives polished treatment. The case sides further come with very fine beveled and polished edges that continue all the way to the clasp. The top surfaces of the bracelet have exactly the same brushing as you see on the case or the bezel, and this is exactly where this integrated watch makes the identity of its own. And if you see closely, both the bracelet links and the interconnecting links have bezel edges which showcase amazing level of polishing and hence attention to detail. The all-new model 15500 comes with all-new movement caliber 4302, which is a self-winding automatic movement and offers some upgrades over the older movement caliber 3120 used in 15400. First of all, the size of the movement here is bigger at 32 mm and it fits much better in this bigger 41 mm case reference. This is also the reason why the date in this model could be moved to meet the dial rehaut. The movement beats at a higher frequency of 28,800 vibrations per hour and offers increased 70 hours of power reserve as opposed to 15400 which had 60 hours of power reserve on offer. The movement comes with hand-finished parts, including all the bridges that receive Geneva stripes and the plates that have circular graining to add to the experience. All the bridges have further polished bevels to add a touch of luxury. All the screws are polished and then the rotor is 22 karat gold with AP logo on it. I checked the accuracy of this watch and after 24 hours of observation, the watch gained only 4 seconds, which is an acceptable level of tolerance. The watch comes with screw-down crown and pulling the crown one step back to position 1 will allow you to wind the movement. Pulling the crown one more step back will allow you to quickly change the date to your required number. Pulling the crown another step back to position 3 will hack the seconds hand and you can adjust the time accurately and synchronize seconds with atomic clock. The watch also comes with instant date change at midnight, meaning there will never be a moment in your wrist experience when you will see the date misaligned between two numbers. Putting the watch in the dark to check the lume performance. The watch comes with decent level of lume and brightness is overall very good too. The seconds hand is not lumed, so you only see 2 hands in the dial. Leaving the watch in the dark for another 10 minutes diminish the lume to almost non-existent, which is one area I was expecting better from this all-new release. Under the macro, the hour hand doesn't only show the dust and debris, but there are also scratches on the polished surface that I can see, and also the edges have some surface roughness or high spots which is really not something I was expecting to see. The minute hand is relatively better in finish, but I can still see some minor scratch marks, which isn't impressive indeed. The seconds hand shows a lot more dust than the other two hands, and the joint finish here is really only just average, and the overall quality on display is disappointing and anything but hot horology. And even at this price point and from hot horology manufacturer, if you can't expect close to perfect finish, I don't know where you can from. The Avamacas come with overall great finish, and there's workmanship on site, which is indeed a breath of fresh air. The dial is very mint, and you can not only see how evenly the square-shaped pattern is spaced, but also the level of attention to detail in the grooves within each square section, which is indeed impressive. On the wrist, the 41mm Royal Oak has a wrist presence that is hard to miss. The bracelet on the watch does not stick straight down, as I explained earlier in the video, and there's a minimum span of watch that is 50mm, which you can use as a reference for lug to lug. My wrist size is 6.5 inches and wristband is 55mm, so you can see that the watch, despite the bracelet flaring, hugs my wrist like it should. Upon the flick of wrist, the way the watch plays with the light is truly a sensational experience. The case is 10.42mm thick, and although it does not look thick in general, if you compare it with extra thin reference Royal Oak 15202 Jumbo, it does look significantly thick. The bracelet is wide at 26mm, and even at the narrowest point at the clasp, it is 18mm, which is relatively a broad profile. So overall, this is definitely not a watch if you want something that stays under the radar. But if you want something that is so beautiful that it can't be missed, this is it. Audemars Piguet Royal Oak reference 15500 is the watch with the history and story from the time of quartz crisis, and how the human efforts to save mechanical watch industry from the collapse has shaped the world today, where if there was ever to be a digital watch crisis, it never happened. This was the watch where the concept of luxury steel watch commenced from. The watch which showed to the world that there is more to these mechanical watches than just the function of telling the time. The watch which changed the concept of luxury from precious metal to preciously machined metal. While it's not a perfect watch and aesthetics and design proportions are subjective, there is one thing which definitely does not have a second opinion. The experience and level of finish on the case and the bracelet you get with Royal Oak is truly something else.